Alright, CNT120, Chapter 6. We're now in the section on configuring Wi-Fi connectivity devices. Now, if you're on campus, we're going to be doing what we're going to talk about here in the lab room. Online, you're going to use the virtual version of what we do in the lab room and do the same thing. Connect up, configure the devices, then configure the wireless devices, then connect in laptops and so forth into the wireless network. All right, so they remind us here APs vary in what they support and what they're able to do, signal strength, features, that sort of thing. But some basic things we do as we start setting up, change your administrator password or set the administrator password, set the SSID, whether it's broadcast or not, what in security, encryption that we're going to be using, and other settings like DHCP and so forth that might be being used in this network. Those would be the basic things we're going to configure on there. They remind us here of a process that you can use to kind of reset and set up. This would be a small home office AP, if you will, or a small office home office router, if you will, that has wireless configured in. Typically decable things. On boot up, you kind of reset it. Sometimes you hold the reset button. Sometimes you hold a paperclip in. Sometimes after it's booted, you hold the paperclip in for like 10 seconds, let it reboot. It'll come up clean. Once it does, what I'll typically do is connect like my laptop or desktop. I plug into it and get an IP from it, browse into it, do the configuration I need to on it. Browse in, plug the default account in to get into it. Once I'm there, change your passwords, go through, set the SSID, set the wireless settings that I'm going to use for my networks, including the security we're going to use, apply all that, and then maybe make some other settings like DHCP and that sort of thing on there that might be needed for that part of the network. And then I'll typically unplug my laptop from the actual switch port, if you will, in the back. That would be over here, and then I connect wireless to it and see, do I have all my settings right, and try to get to the internet, etc., etc. That's the kind of thing we're going to do in our lab, either in the lab room or virtually through Packet Tracer for my online people. That's the process we're going to use. So we'll get a chance to set it all up and then test our settings with our devices as well. In a business environment, they need to think about devices connecting in, onboarding, offboarding, remote wipe. In the days of, I think they mentioned here, we got bring your own device. Prior to COVID, there was some bring your own device to networks, but since COVID and needing to work remotely and then bringing those devices back in, there's been a lot of adjustments to how things are connected to networks and the security of and so forth. So there is some processes now get used if you're going to connect onto a business network where it's like, okay, well, you can, but you need to install this app or use these settings or use this dual authentication or something of that nature that you can be on the network. And then offboarding would be maybe the removing that app or removing that settings and that sort of thing. And in some cases, if it's a company-owned laptop kind of thing, there might be a clause in there where that app is on there for you to connect. And if for any reason that laptop is misplaced, lost, stolen, etc., they have the ability to go in and basically wipe all the data off there, that if it does get stolen, they can protect their data. So those might all be pieces of connecting a device to a company network. And as we said here about bring your own device. Bring your own device might require some of these things. So security. Your 802.11 standard by default had no security. Initially, it was like, okay, we just won't broadcast the SSID. You have to know what it is to connect. And that is a super, super low-level security. Nowadays, you can put an app on a phone and find the SSID. So it's really no security there at all. So there needs to be ways to authenticate and encrypt your communications. So authentication is the process of verifying, oh, this is Doug Brown. Okay, what's your password? Okay, all right. So authenticating that thing should be on the network. And there might even be some MAC filtering that goes on to say, okay, if I don't know this MAC address, I'm not letting you on. It's not a company. It's not a MAC address of a company-owned device. We're not letting you on. That can be done. We're actually going to do that step when we connect up our wireless network for lab. We'll put in our MAC filter and only let that device on. And then we also need to use some sort of encryption to encrypt our data coming from our laptop to the access point, if you will, because it's going in midair. Anybody could potentially capture that. So we want to make sure if they capture it, they can't actually read it. And that's where the encryption comes in. That's where the WEP, WPA, WPA2, WPA3 comes into play, which, sure enough, the next thing mentioned here is WEP. This was back in the 90s, and this was basically like the first step of trying to put some kind of security in. And that was very quickly, compromised, if you will. So moved on to other forms of security down the road. Open system authentication, no role authentication occurs. Shared key authentication. We're all the clients are using the same key, and it was easy to crack, compromise, etc. That's why I said, WEP was really easy to compromise. And a handful of years later, it was replaced by WPA. That's when 11G came along. That's when I kind of implemented 11G in my house. So WPA, wireless protected access, and implemented early 2000s, dynamically assigned every transmission its own key. So a step better. TKIP came along with our way to have a transmission, each transmission have its own key to add some security to it. And in this, the RC4 in secure encryption cipher, it's still kind of used though. WPA2 comes along, handful years later, stronger encryption protocol. We now have the counter mode with CBCs, cipher block chaining, MAC protocol, message authentication code protocol. Now we have encryption and packet authentication for our transmissions, a lot more secure, WPA2. Talks a little bit about this using AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. As we set up WPA, even in our lab, you'll see the AES being used, and that's where that's coming from. More encryption, better encryption. And then Wi-Fi Protected Access version 3, handful of years ago. This became available in mid-2020 timeframe with devices, Wi-Fi certified devices. So that is now becoming more common as a way for and securing our encryption between our device and our access points. Now, they briefly mentioned this, so I broke it out just a little bit so you could see the difference. With personal, this would be kind of like your access point, your standalone access point that you would have at home, where you're basically authenticating your device to your access point. That's what your personal is. WPA, pre-shared key, WPA2 pre-shared key. And that is kind of like for your personal small home network type network. When we move to enterprise, we're now, if we select WPA Enterprise or WPA2 Enterprise, we're now actually having our username, password, if you were authenticated on a server, usually a Radius server on the back end. That now actually authenticates the user. Then we worry about other things. So with our WPA Enterprise, that's what's going on. So if you were to select that, there should be a server on the back end to actually authenticate your users. That's where EAP, Extensible Authentication Protocol, gets used. And this is basically, I think they show it here, this is basically a pathway for the Radius server to authenticate. That's really what that is. That's a pathway for. And this shows you the process that it goes through to do all of that process. Newer and configuration on networks 8021X, we would have your EAP over our LAN. That's what you have here. So we need to configure our network devices to be able to pass that to the Radius server to authenticate and back. Some additional security that can be done they mentioned a couple things here. AP and antenna placement. Yes. If I put my access point along the window at the side of my house, well, some of the signal is going to be in my house, but some of the signal is going to be outside of my house. So that's one of the things they talk about. Like, okay, well, if I put along the outside wall, I'm now putting signal outside of my building. I might need to move that to a center part in the hallway. And on many of the access points that you buy, these ones that are lightweight, I can adjust the range of, meaning how wide of a coverage area does it go. So I might dial it back so it only covers my building and does not spill outside of that. Okay, that's what they mean by AP and antenna placement. Geofencing is a way to kind of put a virtual border around an area. What does it cover? And we're actually adding some like GPS type thing on top, a zone or an area around it. So if I try to connect outside of that, it's like, nope, you're not in our area, you're not part of our facility to do this. And that can be a way to control what gets covered, what does not. We can use guest networks. Guest network, and actually even a lot of devices that you have in homes, you can set up a guest network where it literally would let a friend connect or maybe a visitor connect, and gives them a pathway to the internet, and pretty much that's it. And that is a separate, SSID, that's a separate encryption, the whole 9 yards, to isolate it from your network or maybe the corporate network, if you will, your small business network. You might even have wireless client isolation, similar to. I have other devices like firewalls and other things apply rules on here to really isolate what they have access to and what they don't. And we have things like captive portals. Most of us are familiar with this. You go to log into, even if you go to a hotel and use wireless there, you usually go into a splash screen and they have you plug in your name or your room number or something like that to authenticate you're actually a user in the building. So if you go to even like a library or something like that, you might hit that splash page where it's like, nope, unless you plug something in to identify you belong here, we're not going to let you go on. You might even need to select a option of we'll adhere to these policies while we're using this network. Some security threats, war driving. These are some older pictures I have, but once upon a time, our security class at the college, I'm talking 20 years ago now, our teacher that was teaching for us would have the students drive down one of the major roads in our area and just use a antenna, and they were just trying to see what SSIDs they could find. This was all legit. They were not doing any kind of hacking or anything. They were just trying to see what SSIDs were available. Well, 25 years ago, there were a lot of SSIDs out there, but most people were not secured because, again, we were at like 99, 2000 ballpark. Most people were like, hey, I have wireless, but they had no idea they should turn on some kind of encryption. So these access points were like wide open, and we were talking major big box stores, we'll call them, driving down a road and you'd pick up their SSIDs and they were wide open. So for some people that was like a hobby, trying to find those places, and some would take it a step further and start marking out where they were, so people could use that, so to speak, I'm using air quotes, free Wi-Fi kind of thing. Yeah. So those are threats. Things like evil tweens, an access point that's designed to look like legit, but it's not. Actually doing attacks on your encryption to try to crack through or crack the encryption. These are all threats. When dealing with Wi-Fi networks, some things we can think about and troubleshoot. Using Wi-Fi analyzers. This is actually a clip off of a app on a phone. I had a Wi-Fi analyzer on my phone for quite a while. This allows you to see what SSIDs are out there and what channels are on. This is how I found the interference in my area. I saw like pretty much all the neighbors were on like channel 6 or something like that. So I moved our SSID, our wireless network, over to channel 1 to get away from them and minimize the interference. That can be a handy utility to use as well, just to set up maybe yours or neighbors or something like that. There's other utilities like this that will give you more information that you can install on a laptop. Same idea. What SSIDs out there, what signal strengths are they, and hopefully move things around to avoid problem areas. There is such a thing as called a spectrum analyzer. This is a pretty expensive tool usually, and this will allow you to go a wider frequency band to see if there's other things that are causing interference, whether it be wireless microphones or wireless, wireless this or wireless that. This will pick up those devices and let you know if they're potentially interfering with your signals and your devices. And then here they walk through a handle of things that you can do. One list of capabilities common to wireless testing tools, things that you can do to adjust or find out what might be causing problems in your network. All right, so there is a quick overview of Chapter 6.